Welcome back to more Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland. Last time we defeated Nightmare and restored peace to Dreamland, so this time we're going to go over Extra Mode. Play with half your vitality. In both Kirby's Adventure and Nightmare in Dreamland, Extra Mode is basically the hard mode. Instead of 6 hit points, we only have 3, so everything is a lot more dangerous. To demonstrate this, I went ahead and unlocked all of the stages, so we'll be going through a few stages in Rainbow Resort, starting with Stage 1. In general, Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland is probably one of the easiest Kirby games, so it is nice to have a harder difficulty. Even then, it's not overly difficult. I do feel like Adventures is slightly tougher, partly because of that version having more slowdown and performance issues, making certain areas a lot more difficult to navigate. But in general, it's still not too bad. Another difference in both games' extra modes is that the drink healing item up here, as an example, only heals 1 hit point instead of 2 like in the normal mode. It makes sense because otherwise that would be a full heal, which would definitely make it a lot easier. And in a way it makes sense because it essentially heals a third of Kirby's health, and since Kirby's health is halved, the healing effect is also halved. But beyond having half health and that healing difference, this mode is relatively unchanged. Like, all of the regular enemies and bosses are still the same difficulty. I'd recommend trying to get really good at the timing for the goal game, and also practice some of the sub-games to get extra lives. While this mode isn't overly difficult, it is good to stockpile lives to make things a little bit easier. So next up, I want to show off more of Stage 2. So this is the mini-boss rush, and this is an area I play very differently in Extra Mode compared to in the main mode. Starting with Poppy Bro Sr., certain enemies like this tend to jump around a lot, making it kind of difficult to deal damage directly with a copy ability, without taking damage yourself. So for a lot of mini-bosses, I actually prefer fighting them without abilities in Extra Mode. Because I just take a lot of damage when fighting them with like sword or hammer as an example. Alright, so we got through that fight pretty easily, so next up is Mr. TikTok. One cool detail about this stage in Nightmare in Dreamland is that this song is also different. Similar to the Fountain of Dreams theme, this stage had a different song in Kirby's Adventure. So this used the Arena song, but in Nightmare in Dreamland uses the King Dedede theme from other Kirby games, which is kind of cool because I don't think the song plays anywhere else in Kirby's Adventure as a result, because of the Fountain of Dreams, or the King Dedede fight at the Fountain of Dreams using the standard boss theme, or the Gourmet Race theme in Nightmare in Dreamland. Alright, Mr. Frosty is another example of a mini-boss that is a lot tougher to fight with an ability, partly because this floor is really icy, so trying to line up a direct attack while sliding around is easier said than done. And Bonkers tends to actually give you a lot of stars, so this is probably one of the easiest fights without an ability, and it's very convenient because Hammer is a very good power-up. That being said, I still won't be using Hammer throughout the rest of this boss gauntlet. I have been picking up these abilities just to use as a free star. Basically, right at the start of a fight, like with Fan here, I discarded Hammer and used the star as a projectile, which is a very good strategy if you want a free hit, basically, at the start of each fight. Also, another song that was changed between Adventure and Nightmare in Dreamland is the song that plays during the Meta Knights encounters. In the original, the standard boss theme played, but in Nightmare in Dreamland, a remix of the mini-boss theme from Kirby 64 plays. I really do like how a lot of these songs have been swapped out in Nightmare in Dreamland with more original themes for certain special encounters like this, and the Meta Knights. It's a nice little extra detail. So we got through Fan, so next up is Bugsy, probably another mini-boss that won't go too poorly with the strategy. We have to wait for the little ladybug enemies to appear and then use them as projectiles like so. If you can get both, you can deal a lot of damage, but it's honestly really difficult to avoid accidentally defeating one, or also inhaling both at the same time isn't exactly easy either. But if you can do that, it's a pretty easy boss fight. Alright, so I think the only boss left here is Fire Lion, who also isn't too bad. We basically have to wait for a specific pouncing attack, but the nice thing about Fire Lion is even that attack can't reach us if we fly to the top of the ceiling. So as long as we are very careful, we should be able to get through this entire area without taking damage, which is pretty cool. This was the easier variation of the boss rush, though. I can't say how well the tougher variant would have gone if we had tried that. I don't think I've ever tried that in Extra Mode. I barely play it in normal mode, let alone extra mode, so who knows. I have a feeling it would go a lot worse if I'm being honest. But with that, we've gone through every mini-boss. All that's left is to fly up here and find the Warp Star. One nice thing about getting through there with full health is I don't have to worry about taking damage from that Sword Knight. Alright, so next up, I think I want to try out Stage 5. We're starting out with a ton of Crash Bombers, always a good start. So let's very carefully make our way through here. Again, normally this would be an area where I'd simply take a lot of damage and just run through without really worrying, but with only 3 hit points, I have to take this path a lot more slowly than I normally would. We have a fight with Grand Wheelie, a mini-boss we didn't see in the boss gauntlet, but overall isn't too difficult either. And this next area is definitely one of the tougher areas because of this wind. It can be very tricky to get through here without taking damage, especially with all of these little flying, burning enemies all around that fly after us. So yeah, areas that are normally kind of tricky in a normal mode playthrough are a lot scarier in extra mode. Sections like this are also pretty intimidating because of respawning enemies, so trying to get to this cannon is probably even less likely in this mode compared to the regular mode, just because of having a lot more to worry about. I think one strategy could be to basically use burning to reach that second ledge, and then basically slide through there. So yeah, that might work. Obviously my timing is really terrible. Actually, I think I might try this a few more times. That's definitely not going to work out there. While we do this, one thing I wanted to mention is that Kirby's Adventure has some differences with the extra mode in that version. So instead of... oh. I got that a lot faster than I thought I would. So yeah, your reward for that is a bunch of extra lives. Alright, so let's head to the goal. And next up, I want to go back to Stage 6. As I was saying before I actually got to the cannon in time, Kirby's Adventure has several differences. The biggest one is you aren't able to save in that extra mode. In general, it's not actually that big of a deal because, frankly, Kirby's Adventure is a very short game. So even without the ability to save, it's not too bad to play through that in one sitting. And in Nightmare in Dreamland, even though you can save, I would recommend actually trying to get through extra mode in one sitting, so your lives don't reset. So yeah, even though you can take a break here, which is good because this is a handheld version, which you might be playing in shorter sittings, I would still recommend trying to get through it in one go, just so you don't lose all your extra lives. Like right now, I have 9 lives. If I quit the game, I'd restart at the same place or at the previous stage I finished, but I'd have 2 lives again. Alright, so, this is interesting. We have a ton of respawning enemies and a very narrow passageway to try to get through. So yeah, this is a great example of an area that's a lot more, tricky to navigate, with this current setup. Alright, over here, at least we have a 1-up and a full heal, so, we should be set for the rest of the stage. Another difference in Kirby's Adventure is, there's a different unlock by clearing extra mode. By clearing extra mode in Adventure, you can unlock a sound test. In Nightmare in Dreamland, the sound test is actually unlocked by default, and there's a different unlockable instead, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So yeah, even though it is basically the same mode again, there is still a reward for going through extra mode in addition to the main mode, which is nice. Also, each stage that would normally have a switch in the main mode still has a switch in extra mode, so there is a separate 100% requirement for extra mode. I actually like having the switches in extra mode. I'm glad they're there because they do give you a full heal every time you find one, which is very nice. So even though 100% really doesn't unlock too much outside of getting 100% in the main mode to get, in order to get extra mode in the first place, I actually don't remember if you need 100% to unlock the sound test or just clear it. Either way, I would still recommend going after the switches just to get that full heal. And with that, we should be at the end of Stage 6. Alright, now that we've gone through a few stages, I wanted to talk about something else. So, the Nightmare in Dreamland extra mode unlocks are a little bit different. First of all, there's a different 100% ending screen for clearing extra mode, and after that, and the normal ending, the credits are actually different. This is exclusive to Nightmare in Dreamland because in Kirby's Adventure, both modes share the same credits. I really like how for Nightmare in Dreamland, they did go to a lot of effort for certain things like that. So even though the mode itself is relatively unchanged, it is cool that the little reward, essentially, for the credits is different. Instead of showing the bosses, the extra mode credits show the mini-bosses in Stage 2. Similar to the main bosses, a lot of the strategies used are very interesting and fun to watch. So yeah, it is cool that they went to the effort of creating a second credit sequence for Nightmare in Dreamland. There are a few other things I wanted to mention as well. Extra mode is kind of a staple of the Kirby series. It started in Kirby's Dreamland, and a lot of the different Kirby games have had some version of extra mode. By comparison, Adventures is fairly basic, actually. For example, Kirby's Dreamland has a lot of variations that are basically really interesting and make the entire game a lot more difficult. So Kirby's Dreamland is like a very short game, so it is cool to have a hard mode that actually adds a lot of changes, like new enemies, tougher bosses, and taking more damage from attacks. later extra modes would also use similar methods to change things up, like introducing bonus boss fights, and also reducing the amount of health Kirby has. So it is cool that a lot of things in the Kirby series were introduced very early on and have kind of become staples of the series, even with this game being the second game in the series, well, counting Adventure at least. A lot of things that were established here and in Dreamland are still seen in the Kirby series today, so it is cool to see how much certain trends started at the very beginning of Kirby. So in general, this extra mode is surprisingly basic, but there is still more to it. While this mode might be a little bit simplistic with how much it changed, by clearing extra mode in Nightmare in Dreamland, there's another unlockable. After the credits, there is an additional the end screen that says a new sub-game called Meta Nightmare has been unlocked. This is the final reward, and is definitely worth unlocking, so even though Extra Mode is basically the main game again, both versions do incentivize playing through it, either with the sound test or Meta Nightmare, and I do like that. Even though you do have to play the game twice to essentially unlock everything, it's not that big of a deal. Kirby's Adventure is such a short game, like, an average playthrough takes me about 1 to 3 hours, so playing through it twice really doesn't take very long. And yeah, I would definitely recommend going through Extra Mode, if you want an additional challenge, or if you want to unlock everything. It's really not that bad. It's very easy to get through here with plenty of extra lives, so even if the main game wasn't as easy as I find it, I think most players should still be able to get through Extra Mode, because the game is very generous with extra lives and healing items, so even though this is the hard mode, it's still perfectly doable. So, with all of that being said, we need to go through all of the sub-games, and we'll be doing that next time. So, thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time for more Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland.